Good evening, council. We do have a quorum. We've got all members present this evening. With all members present and a quorum, I want to call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled Greer City Council meeting called and convened this evening, March the 24th, 2020. We are going to have more explanation in terms of this meeting being held remotely as we move through the agenda tonight. But extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary means, and we are exercising that tonight. Having called the meeting to order, I would like council and those that wish to participate to stand with us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I will offer an invocation for our council this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Join me in prayer if you would, please. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we are indeed grateful for the ways that you have blessed us, and even though they are harder sometimes to recognize than others, we know that your mercy and grace and love abounds and surrounds us even in these difficult times. We ask that you would be with us through the business that lays before us this evening. We thank you for the calling that you have placed upon our lives to be servants unto this city. Help us to always be mindful and remember those that are less fortunate, those that find themselves in dire circumstances, and those that have been affected by this virus in so many different ways that we know of in our community. We ask now that you'll be with us through the rest of this meeting, that you will give us insight, understanding, and clarity as we seek to do the business of this city in a different way than we have ever done before. And we'll do that for your honor and glory. We ask these things in Christ's name and for his sake. Amen. Amen. Council, as you are aware, we have opted to conduct this meeting in a fashion that is different than we have ever done before, but as a means of being observant of the state orders that limit gatherings, and to do that to the best of our ability for both the safety of our employees, our council, and our public. We appreciate the time and effort you have put into making sure that we were going to be able to do this as a group. We also thank those folks that are joining us as well this evening. We've got a number of people that have indicated that they are participating in this meeting in a number of different ways, and so shows the importance and the ability for us to reach our community in a non-traditional fashion and setting. You will already note that as we go through the meeting tonight, there are going to be some items that we will have to spend some time and attention on. I will give you more information about the logistics and how we will handle the meeting as we move a little further into our agenda. It will take some getting used to on our part, but we do want to do this in an orderly fashion. You have already seen, either through the testing that we did this afternoon or the pledge and prayer that we had today, that there is some time gap, as you noticed, between the speaker and what you're hearing. So be mindful of that as well when you speak. When we are going from mute to live microphone, there is a delay. of about a second in some cases too. So you won't want to start your comments too quickly, and we'll monitor that some from this end. So I will be giving more specifics about the logistics, actual logistics of the meeting as we move along. But our first order of business this evening comes to us as the first and final reading of ordinance number 9-2020. This is an emergency ordinance to temporarily suspend the normal operating procedures of the City of Greer Council meeting and to authorize the Greer City Administrator and Mayor to take actions to ensure continuity in the delivery of government services and to provide for the health and safety of the citizens of Greer in light of the COVID-19 outbreak and matters related thereto. This matter will require action this evening. We have asked that our council join us. Daniel Hughes is with us this evening, as well as the administrator. I'm going to ask that the administrator open this overview this evening of the first reading and why this is essential at this point in time for us to do, and then I will let him invite Mr. Hughes to join the conversation as to a more in-depth and perhaps legal overview of what we are doing. And then I will give some instructions about how we will proceed with questions and or comments. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Ed Driggers, our administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. What you have before you obviously is a emergency declaration ordinance. A little different than most ordinances that we would encounter. This ordinance requires one reading. So one reading will enact the ordinance, but it does require 2/3 vote of council present by quorum. We have all 7 members of our council present this evening. But again, a 2/3 vote is required for the ordinance to be enacted. One of the reasons that, there's a number of reasons, but one of the reasons that we need to ask of you to enact this ordinance is it will make us eligible for federal funding that would be administered through FEMA and through other federal agencies. It's important for us to be in a position to receive those resources as we work through this national crisis. We are already documenting and logging all of those expenses, and we'll have some additional information on that a little bit later in the meeting. I will ask Daniel Hughes, our city attorney. Daniel, if you could offer some background relative to the state statute that allows us to do this and the general provisions of the ordinance and the powers that it provides.
Sure. Am I unmuted?
You are at this point. Yes, sir.
All right. It's great to be with y'all. Thank you, Mayor Danner and Ed for inviting me to be a part of the meeting this evening. So what you have before you is an ordinance that would, even though it's called an ordinance, it's if adopted this evening would be final on just one reading alone. It is authorized by state statute 5-7-250. And what this ordinance allows us to do is to essentially suspend some of the rules that we are bound by other South Carolina law, particularly the FOIA Act, and so that we can conduct our meetings remotely in the event of emergency situations. And clearly it's been documented by the U.S. government and our state government that this is an emergency situation. And this, you also seen other municipalities and counties through the media adopt similar ordinances, and much of this ordinance mirrors what other municipalities have been considered and perhaps already adopted. As Mr. Greer said, this has to be approved by 2/3 of the members present, and this ordinance will expire on the 61st day. So if approved this evening, it will terminate by my calculations on May the 24th. And so if this is a very fluid situation, as we all know, and if we need to extend it, we can certainly do so. So we'll have to, depending on how our meetings fall, perhaps place this ordinance back on the agenda in our first or second meeting in May to extend it if necessary. And of course, these are unprecedented times, and we're all learning as we go. And there's certainly things that we may have to adapt or amend in this ordinance going forward if we have to extend it so that we can accommodate and provide for our citizens during these emergency circumstances. So the key provisions that you will see in the resolution is that the first paragraph 1 is that it is allowing us, if you adopt it, which is why we're covering this first this evening, to allow for remote or electronic meetings. And FOIA Act will still apply. So we have given proper notice of this meeting this evening, all the matters that you may take action on this evening. So all the FOIA rules still apply, even though we are not physically present in the same room. 2 makes it clear that going forward this evening that council may take action by votes as they normally would in the normal course of their activity. Paragraph 3 is discussing deadlines imposed by city ordinance shall be suspended. The primary reason behind this is there are accommodation taxes, hospitality taxes, business license renewals that are due every month, or that will be coming, or due in April, and we're not intending to extend those deadlines. Those deadlines still apply, but what we are also are able to do is to waive any late fees that may accrue by failure to pay those taxes by their due dates, which is certainly you could do that without violating any conditions of the bonds that those hospitality taxes are being used to pay. So that's one way that we can assist our local businesses through these extraordinary and difficult times, through the slowdown in the economy. Paragraph 4 is authorizing the city administrator to make emergency purchases to prevent interruption of a city project or service. You adopted an ordinance several years ago, Ordinance 2295, that in the event of emergency, the city administrator would have authority to make emergency purchases. Paragraph 4 is simply intended to place everyone on notice that this is an emergency situation, and he would be allowed to make emergency purchases as set forth in Ordinance 2295. Paragraph 6, the city administrator is authorized to cancel and revoke any special events permits, and that blank there would need to be May 24, 2020, and if needed, we can extend that date further through a subsequent ordinance. Paragraph 7 is allowing the mayor to establish a mandatory or voluntary curfew between 11 and 6. Now, we all know this is a very fluid situation. We don't know what will be necessary, but a lot of the ordinances that are being considered and passed by other municipalities have a provision in it that allows the mayor to set forth a curfew. And you will see that it excludes a number of essential services to our economy, as well as persons traveling to and from work and for medical treatment. But it be a way that if the situation arose, that he would be allowed to establish a curfew if necessary. And then paragraph 8 simply establishes that this ordinance will terminate automatically unless renewed on the 61st day. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, Daniel. So for council, what I would like for us to do, just as a sense of procedure, would be that I would call on you individually by council district to make comment and or to ask questions. So we will begin with District 1. We will go through District 6. We will answer those questions or take comment as we go through, and then we'll do a follow-up round as necessary. I think that's going to be the best way for us to do it. Otherwise, we'll have a tendency to talk over each other in some regard, and I think it may make it difficult for us. So my intention at this point is that we will do a roll call as such, and that will give each member an equal opportunity to participate with their comments and questions uninterrupted, and we will make sure that we do that sufficient number of times to have your concerns addressed and answered. So with that, we will start with District 1. Mr. Airwood, any comments or questions in regards to the information that we've been given tonight?
Yeah, as a matter of procedure, do we need to have a motion and second before we go into discussion?
Well, for the purpose of discussion, it's probably appropriate. I would ask, because of that, then if everybody will unmute at this point, and then after we get a motion in a second, we'll mute back. But if everybody is unmuted, I will entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. The roll call will be conducted by Ms. Duncan. And again, she will start with District 1. Oh, excuse me. I got ahead of myself.
But we do want to confirm the motion and the second for the record.
Okay, the motion was made by Mr. Airwood, seconded by Mr. Hopper, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Floor is open for discussion. Now we'll start with Mr. Airwood.
Not a lot of question, but the paragraph 7 about giving you the authority to enact curfew. What right now, as things stand, what's the likelihood? All things remain constant or getting better.
That is a decision that would be made as required, Mr. Airwood. There are some communities that are choosing to go ahead and impose a curfew. I think that most of the communities that have exercised that ability at this point have been larger communities that possibly have typically what you would see in terms of maybe gathering spots in the evening or are in close proximity to areas in the county that may not have as much control as we would have in the city. One of the things that we talk about regularly here is enforcement of any kind, and one of the tenets I believe that we have established is that we want to be respectful of the governor's orders. understand that at the state level, there's not the ability to police the entire state, and I understand why the governor has asked us to be diligent in that regard. But I also know, in talking with our police chief and administrator, that we have to prioritize our efforts in terms of our community policing act. And while we want to, again, be diligent about enforcing the orders, that like some of our other processes are often complaint driven or would be witnessed firsthand. So I guess my immediate answer, Mr. Arrowwood, would be that I don't see at this point in time a need to enforce a curfew. I think our citizens have responded pretty well, and at this point, I would say that only a change in conditions or something that would bring it to your attention as a council or to our attention as a city would cause even that consideration.
Well, right now, did not the governor authorize law enforcement to gave them the option to disband gatherings of 3 or more if they felt like it was a matter of safety and health? Is that not in one of the emergency powers?
Yes, sir. That was in his last order. The chief, myself, and Mr. Driggers have had considerable conversation in that regard. Again, and I'll let the administrator follow up. We want to be respectful of the governor's orders. And, you know, there are situations that arise if it's brought to our attention and or one of our officers witnesses firsthand something that seems to be inappropriate, we are taking an action. But we also are prioritizing the time that our officers are spending and in consideration of their regular duties, how important that may or may not be. You want to add to that?
Only that we recognize that in the governor's executive order, while he is authorizing local law enforcement personnel to do that, our understanding of that is that the intent is to make sure that state law enforcement division is not the only law enforcement in the state that has responsibility in making sure that we are adhering to the not necessarily the recommendations of the guidelines, but the actual orders. And in this last, where particularly we're looking at gathering of 3 or more, we would see that would be more applicable to coastal areas, beaches, those types of things. But it certainly could apply to us in a downtown area or in a public park area. The intent at this point is the social distancing. And so we're giving that authority under order of the governor. That authority is given to all law enforcement within South Carolina. But we have not been placed in a position at this point that we needed to exercise that. But we don't know what tomorrow holds.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Fair enough. District 2.
I don't have any comments.
District 3.
Question, the 8 items that we're talking about here, is this fairly boilerplate type items that would be included in an ordinance such as this, or are these specific items that we've compiled, you know, for this specific situation? Does that make sense?
Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, these are generally boilerplate. The municipal lawyers across the state have come up with or MASC has participated as well, coming up with a ordinance that to use this encompasses all of these provisions are incorporated in the ordinance that most municipalities are adopting. The only thing that's a little different is the direct reference to our Greer City Ordinance 295. And the reason we did that was because clear that the administrator's authority, if you're declaring an emergency, you want to make it clear that this is an emergency situation and emergency purchases may be necessary pursuant to the terms set forth in that ordinance.
That makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. What strikes me about the situation, I know everybody would agree, is just how quickly things have moved over the last couple of weeks and how quickly things have developed. And so I think this makes a lot of sense. And I'll just say that I appreciate the communication already from Ed and Rick over the last couple of weeks as things have developed. And so I think this makes a lot of sense, and I'm good with it.
Thank you, sir. District 4.
I don't have any comments.
Thank you, sir. District 5.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. District 6.
No comment.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to follow up on Mr. Hopper's comments. We are especially grateful as myself as mayor and Ed as administrator, and I'll certainly give him time to follow up as well too. But beyond that, as a staff, as Mark mentioned, every time one of our phones goes off with an alert from the governor, we are either on the phone or in person trying to decipher what the next thing coming up is and how we're going to adjust as a body of employees dealing with the public. And it has been such that by the time we have been able to formulate policy and implement changes, that by the next morning we seem to have gotten a new directive or new direction. And so we are certainly doing our best to stay abreast of the changes. One of the things, and I think to Mr. Arrowwood's comments earlier, is that certainly on the governor's behalf, crafting an order like they are doing simply is just impossible to cover every conceivable action that might be required. And so there is, for lack of a better description, possibly often gray areas and or areas that are not addressed entirely. And in most cases, we have been fortunate to lean on assistance from Daniel and the Municipal Association and others to figure out how other folks are going to handle it and do it. And in some cases, we are proceeding on our own. And so that ability that you have graciously offered to us has allowed us to address issues in a very timely fashion. And I know our employees and our public appreciates it. It's obviously unusual to be in a situation like this, and having the ability and your support has been a particularly effective method for us. And it has not been without a glitch, and for those we apologize. We have some key members of our staff that are out for various different reasons, and sometimes we just don't think of everything that they do for us on such a regular basis. And so for those emails that you may have missed, or for the communication that you may have missed in some regard, hopefully everybody is up to speed, and forgive us too for the times that I have sent you an email, and Ed has it at essentially the same time, or vice versa. So thank you for your support. Anything you'd like to add?
Ditto. Thank you.
Okay. All right, before we vote, let me go through the order one more time, and we'll see if we have any other comment. District 1?
Nothing further.
District 2?
Nothing further.
District 3?
Nothing further.
District 4?
Still no comment.
District 5?
No, sir.
District 6?
No.
I have a motion and a second. Hearing no further questions, comments in that regard, Ms. Duncan, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you, council. That concludes our first vote in a remote meeting. If you will temporarily mute your line for me, that would be of assistance. If you will allow me to back up just a moment, we are not able to identify everybody that has come in tonight. That is an option that you have in terms of joining this meeting. It would be beneficial for us if you are a member of the media or the press or someone who gets our regular communications to let us know you joined the meeting tonight. If you will simply send a email to Ms. Duncan, which would be tduncan@cityofgreer.org, and just let her know that you were part of our meeting, and whatever means you joined it, we will add that as a matter of record. And so with that, we will move forward to public forum. Did we have anybody indicate this evening or call in to appear in public forum, Ms. Thompson? While we exercise the option to allow public forum, we have had no one indicate that they wanted to speak tonight. So no one has indicated that they are going to speak in public forum. Council, if you will unmute your device at this particular time. We will consider the minutes of the council meeting from March 10th, 2020. In order to consider those minutes, I will need a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
by Mr. Bettis and a second by
Second.
Mr. Hopper. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any items of note for the clerk this evening? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Ms. Albert? Oh, we lost her.
Well, this is a first.
Well, thank you, council. Hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us here shortly. Ms. Albert? All right, we'll proceed with the meeting, and we'll give her an opportunity to weigh in.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Yes.
Yes. Your vote, please, in regards to the minutes of the meeting from March 10th, 2020.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, we'll move to departmental reports this evening. We have the Building and Development Standards Activity Report from February 2020. That discussion will be led this evening.
Reports contain his information.
Oh, okay.
And we'll have Ms. Howell presenting financial activity.
Oh, okay. All right. The report is contained in your packet. We do have Ms. Howell this evening to give us a financial activity report. Ms. Howell, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to present the financials as of February 29th, 2020. If you're following along in the summary financial report, I'm on page 2, beginning with the general fund. The year-to-date revenue is $19,952,000. The year-to-date expenses are $19,894,000, which is 3% over budget. But if you look at the dashboards, which are on page 7 and 8, you'll see where we compared the actual to benchmarks that we do have a negative overall variance there of $1,109,000. The general fund cash balance is $18,412,000. Moving on to the hospitality fund, the year-to-date revenue is $1,654,000, which is 4% over budget. The expenses are $1,868,000, and the cash balance is $1,006,000. Lastly, the stormwater fund, the year-to-date revenue is $1,325,000. Year-to-date expenditures are $942,000, and our cash balance in the stormwater fund is $1,466,000. That concludes the report.
Thank you, ma'am. Council, if you would unmute your device at this point in time, we will proceed again with questions or comments in that regard, starting with District 1. Mr. Arrowood?
No questions.
District 2?
No comments.
Question 3. District 3.
Nothing from me.
District 4?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. District 5?
No questions.
And District 6?
I'm good.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. We appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Council will move to the administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. We so appreciate you joining us. I've heard this term over and over and over the last several weeks, and that is unprecedented. And that is certainly where we are in responding to the COVID-19 crisis worldwide, within our nation, within our state, and our response here in our own community. One of the things that we have recognized from the very beginning is that we have a responsibility first and foremost to the citizens of our community. And then we also have a responsibility for making sure that we continue essential government services that are being provided within our community as well. One of our primary responsibilities in that area is in public safety. And so we understand our role and our responsibility in that area, and all provisions are being made to make sure that we are carrying out our responsibility, our mission in that area. We've needed to react swiftly. There's been a number of things that we've needed to do. I shared with you earlier today email communications that we have had with all of our employees. We do that in a mass email setting. I have now provided 3 of those communications to our team, and an additional communication sent to our team today from our HR department as well. A couple of those things that I wanted to review with you this evening is, as we approached what was beginning to be recognized here as a major issue and a concern for us back on March the 9th, which was not that far back. But at March 9th, we were still in a situation that we did not have a declared pandemic. And since that time, we have. But initially in our communications, we were advising our team members, our employees, that if they were sick, to stay home. First and foremost, please do not come into the community. Please do not come into the workplace if you are sick. We gave our employees instructions on hygiene, the need for them to use soap and water, to also to use disinfectants and sanitizers that we've made available to them. We gave our employees instructions in general hygiene about simple things like covering your mouth if you sneeze or you cough, disposing of any types of tissues appropriately, often cleaning surfaces. We began immediately to put protocols in place in all of our frontline operations for sanitation, making sure that we were sanitizing with the equipment that we have available to us on a regular basis. And those things have continued for us. We started advising our employees that what we would designate as those for critical operations versus non-critical. At that point in time, we did not identify what we would designate as essential or non-essential, and I'll have some information on that as we're continuing to move forward. But more than anything, we said if you do report to work ill, that as your employer, we would be sending you back home. And that was our general instructions as this began for us. As we moved into the next week, last week on March the 16th, we expanded our communications to our employees, reminding them of the good hygiene methods that were recommended to them, not only from CDC, from DHEC, but also here in our own safety team, our health and wellness team that we have on board with the city. Again, reminding employees what they needed to do in regard to good hygiene. We were reminding folks that they were not to report to work ill, but we went on a little farther in that communication, advising our employees that we had made some operational changes at that time. We suspended travel for all city employees to any type of training and conferences. That was suspended indefinitely, and that suspension is still in place. We advised our employees that requests to perform work remotely needed to be approved by their department head and by the city administrator. So we are reviewing those requests on a case-by-case basis. Again, because of the nature of our work, about 70% of our work is relative to public safety. And so we don't always have the luxury of someone being able to work remotely. So we do consider all of those requests on a case-by-case basis. We've only had less than a dozen of those requests to date, and we have been able to approve all of those of employees that have needed to be away from the workplace, either for concern for being around others, the social distancing concerns that they may have, or more specifically because they needed to care either for a child that was out of school or is out of school, or they needed to care for a parent or another person that may be in the home. So we made our folks aware of what our policy was relative to that. We encouraged them to continue practicing social distancing. We asked them to, with every attempt to use teleconferencing, uses of like Zoom, we purchased license for all of our departments so that we can conduct conference meetings just like this within departments, also with outside contractors, other parties that need to do business with the city. And so we have those tools in place for us and are using those now. And of course, again, asking any employee that had symptoms of coronavirus or they suspected that they had been exposed, we asked those employees to self-quarantine to let us know that was the case. We've only had 2 issues where there's been some concern. We had an employee that prior to the travel ban attended a conference where someone exhibited the symptoms of coronavirus. That employee placed themselves on self-quarantine. We later learned that there was no diagnosis, there was no positive test for coronavirus of the individual that was there, and the self-quarantine was lifted. We had another circumstance within our workplace that we had an employee that exhibited symptoms of coronavirus. That person referred themselves to their personal physician. Their personal physician referred them for a coronavirus test. They did indeed take the test and they tested negative. So we have no reported situations with our employees of being exposed directly to coronavirus. And again, we're taking every precaution to continue to stay in that manner. One of the things that we advised our employees is that we understood the stress that this type of event can place on them, specifically related to continuation of pay, compensation of pay and benefits. We advised them of our policy of how we would handle full-time employees and part-time employees. We later revised that, and I'll review that in just a moment. But what we said to our employees is that if you have available leave time, this is the appropriate use of that leave time. If you do not have leave time, then we were in a position that we would loan you leave time until such time you would accrue that and be able to pay that back. Again, our highest priority was to make sure that our employees did not have a gap in compensation, and we believe that this policy would certainly guarantee that to happen. At that time, we said to our part-time employees, while they are not eligible for benefits or leave benefits, that this would be an opportunity that we would provide them make-up work opportunities in the future, so that if they did lose any time relative to absence during this crisis, that they would be able to make that up in the future and therefore be made whole relative to their compensation. And so we felt very comfortable with that. We issued a press release at that time, primarily announcing that we were canceling a couple of our public events. We canceled the Atastic Easter event. We canceled the Greer Goes Global International Festival at that time. We also announced that jury trials and traffic court was suspended until further notice, and that is still in place. We discontinued the use of our electric vehicles, our shuttles in the downtown area. We suspended their operation indefinitely. We made contact to all renters of our event spaces. At that point, we were identifying anyone that had a confirmed booking for a party of 50 or more at that time. We reached out to all of those who were using our properties to be able to cancel or postpone. We have suspended our rules relative to refunds on any facilities that we rent, because again, we were trying to make sure that we were minimizing through social distancing the number of people that were gathering. And of course, through communications with the mayor, with the general public, we continue to ask residents to assist in helping the spread, and we gave general hygiene guidelines to our community from a local perspective as well. Yesterday, we issued our most recent communication from me to our team members. In that communication, we announced that we were closing our lobbies in many of our recreational facilities. We have accomplished that. We have drop boxes at each of our locations. All of our locations are posted with a telephone number and with an email address. Employees are on the inside of our facilities processing the work on a day-to-day basis. But we are limiting access into the public buildings at this time, and we'll continue to do that until further notice. We're continuing to advise our employee that our first and foremost issue and concern is for the health and well-being of both the general public and for our employees, and that's the need for these rules and regulations as we continue to move forward as well. It is, again, and we're emphasizing with each of our communications that essential government services need to be provided to our community, and work plans have to be put into place to allow us to be able to do that. I give full credit to all of our department heads who are continuing to be creative and look for ways that we can continue to serve without any interruption to business within our community. We're just having to do that in a bit of a different format. We have now identified our employees who are essential versus non-essential, and that is simply by definition of whether or not it is essential for them to be on location with us, or it's essential for us to be able to call them in when needed to provide essential government services. And we are communicating that with all of our team at this time. We again made them aware of continuation and pay provisions that we put into place. And we are encouraging our employees that if they believe that they're working in an environment that gives them concern for either themselves or their family, that they should stay home. And we are working with, and as I indicated earlier, we've had less than a dozen that have requested that, but we have granted 100% of the requests that we've received for folks to do remote work. We do consider on a case-by-case basis if we can provide that accommodation for remote work. We reemphasize with them our restrictions for our employees relative to travel and social distancing. And we made them aware that we now have information that has been provided to us through the federal government, through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We are sharing with them that provisions are being made through the federal government for additional sick leave to be made available to both full-time and part-time employees. The effective dates of that benefit is April 2nd, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. And so through the communication today, we identified the 6 criteria that would make someone eligible to receive that benefit. We've also made them aware of how that is compensated, the amount of paid sick leave that they would be entitled to, again, what that rate of pay would be, and letting them know as well that if they were to exhaust that, that we are still covering them through their remaining balances of leave, and again, with our policy of offering loan time to them if they should need time and no longer have available leave. So again, that was made available to them today. It also provided additional information that the Act provides for an expanded FMLA leave as well. Some of those are just the details of making sure that we're still complying with all federal statutes. We still have to comply with ADA regulations. We have to comply with HIPAA regulations. And so we're being very, very careful to protect the rights of our employees, but we're doing that also in a way that we protect the health, not only of the employees, but the health of folks that visit our facilities and do business with the city. In the ordinance that you passed earlier, Mr. Daniel Hughes gave a little information relative to the suspension of deadlines. What that will also do for us and will do for our business community is this allows for us that our business license that are due now, April 30th, those business licenses that are due, it gives us the ability that the extension of time, this 61 days, we're able to provide that there are no penalties for any type of late payments for business license. We do encourage folks to submit if they're able to do that, but we certainly recognize that we will extend all of those deadlines for that 61-day period. We'll also be doing that relative to our hospitality and accommodations, tax collections. Those are remitted to us on a month-to-month basis. Those also will be extended. Those deadlines will be suspended for the 61-day period as well. It is our hope and our intent that offers some relief to our business communities while we know that they are in a tight cash flow environment. And we would continue to evaluate that if there is a need for council to consider extending the emergency ordinance, emergency declaration in the future. Council obviously would be involved in giving us direction on how you would like to proceed in that manner. Our service, providing our service levels is our top priority. The continuity of business plan is in place. We actually have a formalized continuity of business plan, and we have implemented that plan. The mayor has been working with staff and with myself relative to decisions that need to be made for the general health and welfare of our community. My role and responsibility has continued to be operationally within our organization and our employees. I believe that that's gone extremely well, and we've been able to make decisions that have had positive impact, we believe, both for our employees and for our community. I am in communications daily with our county emergency operations centers. They provide an update to me and all municipalities within the respective counties. But we have the good pleasure of being in 2 counties. So we are working with both the Greenville County Emergency Operations Center as well as the Spartanburg County Emergency Operations Center. Our first point of contact with those centers is our fire chief, Dorian Flowers, and he has continued to represent us well, making sure that our plans are communicated to the respective counties, and then of course them sharing information back with us. And that's the information that I wanted to share with you relative to COVID-19. I'm certainly available to answer any questions, but I will say before we do that, the only reminder that I need to put back out there is that please remember that next week, March 30th, Monday, is the deadline for submitting the economic interest reports to the State Ethics Commission. Again, those reports are due no later than March 30th. If we can assist you in any way with that prior to the deadline, please let myself or Ms. Duncan know, and we'll be glad to assist you in any way that we can. Certainly glad to answer any questions that any members of council may have relative to our response to COVID-19.
Council, obviously a lot of information. If you'd like to unmute your phone or device at this point in time, I will recognize you individually as council members to see if you have questions of Mr. Driggers in regards to his report this evening. It's a lot to digest. Obviously, you understand the depth and breadth of efforts that have been made on his office's behalf in terms of communicating not only with our staff but with our community as well too. With that, Mr. Dumas, if you want to turn your microphone on, if you want to ask a question, we'll be to you soon. Otherwise, we will go ahead. With that, then I'll ask Mr. Airwood, any questions of the administrator, sir?
Yes, sir. Since we are in that time frame, and I know we're extending deadlines, but we're in the time frame for business license renewal. I know that still construction is continuing, and I'm assuming plans are being submitted to be reviewed. does the contractor, developer, whoever it may be, have the ability to pay directly to the city, or I know we have the option of paying online, but there's premium charged to that. And if you've got, if it depends. I mean, you're going to have your plan review fees and then permitting fees. And then when you add 3% on top of all of that, that gets rather expensive, especially if it's just to an individual or a one-time project where, they're not, it's not a whole development, but, do we have any ability for someone to pay directly via check?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we do. And that was the purpose of installing the drop boxes at our locations. We can, by telephone and through email, communicate, whether it's for plan reviews or for permit requests. We can calculate those. Now, those permit fees, those would need to be paid upon issuance of the permits. But we do have the ability that we can calculate those, inform the contractor of that amount. They can then place that in the Dropbox, let us know it's there, we collect it. It just enables us not to have that walk-through traffic in the lobby, but we're able to do all the business that we were doing previously. None of that has stopped.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
I know you said you were restricting access to the city hall. What about rec department and like public services? Are they restricting access to those buildings?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, sir. The restriction is for all of our facility lobbies, and so we're not allowing customers into the lobby of the operations center at either recreation or at public services. We've restricted that access at courts, we've restricted that access at police, and we've restricted that access at the fire department as well as here at City Hall. Provisions are in place at each of those locations for us to continue to conduct business, but we are not allowing walk-in in those lobby areas.
And I also agree with what you said earlier about these being unprecedented times. And I say that to say that, sometimes there may be decisions that you and the mayor have to make, and we as a council just have to trust you, because this is something we never imagined would happen in our wildest dreams.
Yes, sir.
And we do appreciate that. We are very, very sensitive to that responsibility, and we thank you for that ability at this point. District 3.
Appreciate your the information, Mr. Driggers. I know you've had a lot of plates spinning and a lot of things to think about on the fly, but I don't have anything further.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. District 4. You're muted. You're muted, Lee.
As soon as you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Gotcha. Got the email today about the parks being closed down. How are we going to enforce that? We just have signs up, or what's the protocol there?
Yeah, we recognize that there's really limited enforcement opportunities that's there. We are hopeful that we will get community compliance without the need for enforcement. We certainly are in a position that our employees can remind folks that those parks are closed. We have put up signage at all of our park locations. We have also put up caution tape around all playground areas. So it's pretty evident that we're discouraging folks from entering into those areas. But I have to admit, no, we do not have police officers at the entrance to our parks prepared to stop folks or to turn them away. We are looking for voluntary compliance. If we do not receive voluntary compliance, then we would have to step up our ability through education in those areas, making sure people that they are aware of why those facilities are closed, and that we would ask them to please move on.
Mr. Dumas, in that same regard, we're also back to an earlier conversation that we had. We are enforcing with the spirit of the law in terms of gatherings as well too. We realize that pathways through our parks and sidewalks and other things like that are public property that we physically can't control everybody that uses those. What we're more intent on at this point is discouraging larger gatherings, impromptu soccer games, basketball games at the courts, larger gatherings on the disc course. Those types of things are what we're focused on as much as anything. So that's another part of this enforcement puzzle that we're dealing with.
Well, I just think it's a good move that we're shutting the parks down right now. There was some recent information that came out about the quarantine cruise ship that said that virus stayed around on surfaces for 17 days. And so, if you got one infected child on a lot of those plastic surfaces, it'd be almost impossible for us to go out and to disinfect. And so I think it's a really good call that you made the decision to shut those parks down for now for the purpose of safety. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for all you're doing, Mr. Driggers, and your staff.
Mr. Bettis.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any add or any questions other than I have praise for the steps that you've taken thus far.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Albert?
No, I don't have any questions. I just appreciate everything that you're doing and the extra work and time that you're putting into it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Council, we will move to the appointments of boards and commissions. I do not have information in regards to the Board of Architectural Review and have spoken with Mr. Hopper earlier today. There's new information in regards to the Planning Commission vacancy in that regard, either for District 3, so we have no new information in regards to boards and commissions. Council, we will move to the body of our business. At this point, I would ask that you unmute if you're not already. The first item that we will consider this evening is going to be a matter of old business. It is the second and final reading of ordinance number 7-2020.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is Mark Hopper. Due to the interest shown by residents early on in the process on this item, and due to our extenuating circumstances regarding our meeting, et cetera, the craziness over the last couple of weeks, I'd like to make a motion to carry this item over to a future meeting.
So noted, Mr. Hopper. I will read the ordinance and note your motion to that would be to hold over. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Make a motion to hold over.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I will ask for a second in just a moment then, please. I've got, this is the second and final reading of ordinance number 7-2020. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of property owned by CMT Investors, LLC, located at 1940 Gibb Shoals Road from I-1 Industrial District to DRD, which is Design Review. We do have a motion to hold the second reading over. I'll now entertain a second.
I'll second that.
So we now have a motion and a second to hold over the second and final reading of ordinance number 7-2020. We will proceed in terms of discussion as we have here to this point. Mr. Arrowood, comments in regards to reading of ordinance number 7-2020, sir?
No comments or questions.
District 2, Mr. Griffin.
No comments.
District 3.
So I've spoken in depth at our last meeting about my outpouring of interest in this item from my residents being in the district. Explain again, I'll say it again, I don't have a problem with the development itself or even the project necessarily itself. The outpouring of response that I've gotten was simply to know, desire to understand fully what we're getting into from the residents' perspective. And so just again, given that early interest and outpouring of feedback, and given us having to pivot on the fly for this forum, for this meeting, that's the interest in what I'm expressing this evening.
Thank you, sir. District 4.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Hopper. There was a lot of interest and a lot of folks that wanted to come out and say their piece the other night on this issue. And obviously in this forum, they're not going to have that opportunity. So I completely understand holding it over for our next meeting, or maybe the next one when we can meet in public and discuss this, when folks can come out and give comment and have a chance to speak.
District 5.
I too sympathize with Mr. Hopper's words, even though I support the project and I would vote in favor of it. I do support his wish that people would be able to come to a future meeting and further talk about it.
District 6.
Yes, I feel it would only be fair to hold it in a public meeting where the residents of the area could come in and speak if they had additional information to share. So I see no problem in holding it over.
Thank you, ma'am. I share and I understand the comments tonight and the concerns that were shared by various members of the council. I do agree, even though we were very, very intentional about giving the public the ability to participate, at least in the public forum portion of this meeting this evening by phone, that it was fairly short notice. While it complied with the law, we were not able to give that in a lengthy fashion. I guess my hesitancy in some regard is that this may be a new normal for us, and if it is, the ability to participate in a face-to-face meeting in the near future may not come about. I would appreciate follow-up from any of you in that regard. I will intend on making direct communication with the developer and seller of the property to give them some insight and overview of this process. We know from time to time there are limits to how long a project can be placed on hold, and I think we need to be sensitive to those. Given the vote the first time and the fact that we only had 3 people that spoke in opposition that evening, while that number is significant in and of itself, it doesn't. I think that we need to be mindful of the fact that while we do have, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually 3 weeks between this council meeting and the next. We need to be sensitive to the fact that we could very well be holding our next meeting in this same vein. So quickly, then any follow-up comments, District 1?
Yes. Do we know if a delay will, could it negatively impact the development?
Mr. McMahon is online with us as well. If we can unmute him. Brandon, are you aware of any issues with that?
I've talked with the developer yesterday afternoon, and he is wanting to get the deal done. I believe they have some deadlines for closing, but I do not have the exact time of those.
Okay, Mr. McMahon, if you can communicate with the owner of the property and the developer, that information may be insightful to us at our next gathering.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Others, other comments, Mr. Airwood?
Well, I mean, is 3 weeks I don't want our vote to come after some deadlines have passed for closing or whatever may affect the project.
Let me redirect, if you don't mind, here for just a second. Mr. Hopper, do you have any information in that regard personally?
I do not know any specifics regarding any hard deadlines or negative impacts regarding timeline for the developer and the property owner, unfortunately.
Mr. Airwood, I would suggest that we follow up, have Mr. McMahon follow up. If that time restriction is such, and they know that we have another meeting coming up, and I can't give you the date right off the top of my head, there's a possibility that they could work out something to possibly extend that deadline to beyond another vote, if possible. Anything else in that regard?
No, sir.
District 2? Mr. Griffin, you'll need to turn your microphone on, sir.
Along the line of what Jay's talking about, I hate to lose it because they miss a deadline or something.
Typically, what they would be up against would be a contractual obligation. It's a due diligence period of some kind. Construction is probably months and months away at this point, so I don't think that beyond the restrictions of a contractual arrangement on the due diligence, there would be expenditures that would not be able to be recouped, or the contract couldn't be extended. We'll have Mr. McMahon report on that to us as soon as he's able to give us some more information in that regard.
All right then.
District 3?
Yeah, I totally hear what's being said. The last thing I want to do is cause any negative ramifications for the developer or the property owner. As I know everyone's interest is, I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to give full voice to our residents in the process. And it's a very unfortunate and kind of crazy situation we faced, having to pivot. And everybody's attention has probably just been elsewhere over the last couple of weeks, our residents as well as us. And so that's kind of where I am. My hope is, just kind of thinking through the timeline of when they brought this to Planning Commission and then now to us, would be that they would have built in some sort of contractual buffer. But of course, we don't necessarily have a way to know that without them confirming that. So beyond that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, sir. District 4?
Yeah, we talked about this being an unprecedented situation. This is the first time we've ever had a virtual meeting, and I would hope that between now and our next one, we'll do an even better job of getting the word out and letting people know this is the venue and the forum we're going to be using going forward, and give everybody an opportunity to plug in and connect and say their piece, because likely we're going to be meeting just like this in 2 to 3 weeks, and that'll give the public a chance to engage if they want to. And I'm with Mr. Hopper too. I hope this doesn't have anything to do with hindering the development or the banking situation or whatever's happening there, but I think we can all agree that that's happening on all fronts in all industries right now, and there's a slight delay across the board. So I seriously doubt it's going to hinder this project, and I believe that there'll be understanding with us kind of pumping the brakes on the process just a touch, because these are unprecedented times.
Thank you, sir. District 5.
Nothing further, sir.
District 6.
Yeah, I agree with the fact of giving them a little bit more time. I know that, this was short planned, and we were hoping everything was going to go good. So I was kind of even surprised to see that one on the agenda for this time, due to the fact. So yeah, just give them a little bit more notice, whatever we have to do.
Thank you.
If I may, as a point of order, obviously there is a motion to hold over or to table this item. If that motion passes, that is exactly what happens. If that motion should fail, we then would go back to the original motion for council to take action, either affirmative or negative, on the actual agenda item itself. Just want to make sure there's clear understanding of how that would happen.
Great. Everybody clear on that? With that, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
No.
Mr. Griffin,
No.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
No. Council, it'll pass. It'll be held over. Will it require it being placed back on the agenda, or will we automatically place it back on the agenda?
We would place it next agenda.
It'll be placed on the next agenda. We will, I will forward you information from Mr. McMahon as soon as I have that information. Council, we move to the second item of old business this evening, which is the authorization of the relocation of certain alleys and a quick claim deed proportions of said alleys and other related matters. This is information you received at our last meeting in regards to alleys within the footprint of the development project downtown that includes the hotel and parking garage. Any new or additional information in that regard, sir?
No, sir. No new information. Just as an update, if this motion does pass this evening, it sets in motion that this would actually be filed in county records as early as tomorrow. Once this is filed, it gives us the ability then for the developer, Sycamore, Greer, for them to be able to transfer the property that the garage will be on to us. And then that enables us to be able to mobilize the contractor for construction of the garage.
We'll entertain a motion that we receive the second and final reading of ordinance number 8-2020.
So moved.
Second.
Everybody will need their microphone on for discussion. We have a motion and a second. Have you got names on those? We got a motion and a second. Questions or comments? Mr. Airwood, District 1.
No, sir.
District 2.
No.
District 3.
Yes.
We're taking comments or questions right now.
Nothing from me.
Okay, thank you, sir. District 4.
No comments.
District 5.
No, sir.
District 6.
No comment.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion and a second. I hear no further discussion. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council will move to items of new business, the first of which is the final reading of resolution number 6-2020. This is consideration of a proposed road closure. Mr. Driggers, information please, sir.
Yes, sir. This authorizes our city attorney to proceed with the process of the road closure. And so this does not actually close the road. It then would enable Mr. Hughes to go through that process. Mr. Hughes is online with us. Is there any additional information that you may want to share relative to that process?
No, no additional information. This is just consenting for me to move forward with the process of road closure, which would include a public hearing at a later date, advertisement, and public notice in a newspaper. And I've already written all of the utility companies. All of them have indicated they don't have any objection to the proposed road closure.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to receive resolution number 6-2020.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hopper moves. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bettis. Any further discussion?
This is District 6, Judy. Now, this is down at Babel Brook off of 290 that you're talking about, correct?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
This is part of the.
Claire, just want to make sure those that were listening were clear on what road we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and let me add in, this is part of we have an agreement with CSX Railroad to tear down the bridge on the other side of this portion of the road that's being closed, which is no longer being used anyway.
Mr. Hughes, if I'm not mistaken, that contractual arrangement with them allows that the bridge could be rebuilt at some point in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. We got a motion and a second on resolution number 6-2020. Further comments? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, item B of new business is the first and final reading of resolution number 7-2020. This is the allocation of the Greenville County CDBG and home funds for program year 2020. We had information in that regard as presented by representatives of the CDBG at our last meeting. There was some discussion in regards to those. I believe Mr. Sell joins us as well for that, and I will recognize him for any additional information or updates that might be relevant to resolution 7-2020.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, this resolution comes to you annually to set the allocations for CDBG and home funding, as well as the subrecipient funding. Staff meets with GCRA staff annually, usually in January and February of each year, to review the expected funding and program income for the upcoming year and to develop the program objectives within that funding. Those we come up with recommendations that are presented to council during the public hearing that was held before the March 10th council meeting. The information and funding levels that were presented during the public hearing is what is contained within the resolution. And that information that was presented during the public hearing is contained in your agenda packet as well. In regards to any new or additional information, there is some additional information in regards to subrecipient funding, and that is the application analysis and the scoring sheets used by GCRA staff to make the recommendations for the subrecipient applications. All the applications that were received were funded. As council knows, we always have more requests for funds than what's available. A couple of years ago, we were able to increase the funding level for subrecipients from about $40,000 to $60,000. All those funds were allocated this year to that $60,000 level, with all programs receiving some funding through those allocations. That's all the information I have, and I can answer any questions council may have.
Council, there have been a couple of you that have contacted me in regards to questions or concerns that you had at our last meeting. One of the things that that we need to keep in mind as we move forward here, and Mr. Sell and Mr. Driggers, please correct me if I've gotten any of this information wrong, but our allocation of the CDBG funds and home funds is an action that we take on an annual basis. And while there may be recommendations in that serve as a guideline for us through the upcoming year, we also can exercise discretion in terms of how those funds are applied under certain circumstances, and also to discuss with staff changes that we might feel are appropriate as well too. So while I was not able to get you all of the answers or information that you may have possibly needed or wanted in that regard, this program offers us at least a certain degree of ability to work with the staff to make appropriate decisions in things that may be relevant to the program through the course of the year. And so I hope I have not overstated that, Mr. Sell or Mr. Driggers. So we do this allocation, and like many allocations that we do, if we decide at some point in the year that we feel like there is a more appropriate use or directive, then we give that to the staff. Is that correct?
Mayor, that is correct. There is flexibility to be able to allocate funds as different projects become available to us, as long as it's a qualified use under the guidelines set by HUD. That factor always has to be in place, that it has to be a qualified use. But through our discussions with GCRA over the years, when opportunities have come up allowing us to possibly move funds from one type of program or one allocation to another, we've worked with GCRA and have been able to accomplish that on multiple occasions. And that we have yet to run into any problems that I can recall over the past years where we were ever in disagreement with GCRA on what those possibilities could be, or programs for recommendations. Again, the only qualifier is it just has to be a qualified use under the HUD guidelines.
Just for clarification, are we speaking to all program areas of CDBG or just subrecipient?
No, the subrecipient is dedicated to that specific purpose.
Because it has a maximum amount
Yes.
that can be allocated
Yes.
under the guidelines. So the dollar amount
In regard,
is all.
Yes.
That is correct. Mr. Driggers is right. The maximum allocation that can be made for subrecipient funding is a percentage based, and it's 7% of the funds that are available in the program.
Yeah, I think most of the questions that I got in regards to this, and quite honestly, since we met last time, I've had other things on my mind and wasn't able to contact the staff. But from my experience in the past, if we saw opportunity to change a directive in terms of where funding was going to be used, or a project for that had an applicable use under the funding for infrastructure or rehab, we've been able to shift some of those funds in the past.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay, I think that will address, at least for this point, the action that we have before us tonight, which is the final reading of Resolution 7-2020. I will entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Mr. Bell,
Second.
And a second?
Yes.
Mr. Airwood. Again, for the sake of purpose, District 1, Mr. Airwood.
The only thing that I was surprised about, and I don't think I heard this incorrectly, but it had to do with the sub-recipient program. I noticed that some of the organizations that normally apply didn't apply this time. And I believe IMA was advised us that everyone who applied was funded. Maybe not at that, well, I know not at the level requested, but what was there, like 5 applications, and she said they were all funded. So I'm just wondering if that's, to me, that seems a little abnormal. I don't know if it seems abnormal to the rest of the council or not.
There were a total of 6 applications. There were a couple. There was one organization that received funding last year that did not apply this year by their choice.
That's all the information I think we have at this time. Application, public notice was given and applications were accepted.
You know, I'm just saying it was kind of surprising that
Well, there are
late for us.
Yeah, there are a variety of reasons, particularly for some of the nonprofits that operate in our community, that they might or might not want to apply or be eligible to apply, or by directive of a board may not seek to apply because of either reporting responsibilities and or other stipulations or regulations. And so we see people come and go from time to time. Anything else, Mr. Airwood?
No, sir.
District 2.
Nothing.
Thank you, sir. District 3.
Nothing from me.
Thank you. District 4.
No, sir.
District 5, Mr. Bettis.
Nothing further.
Ms. Albert, District 6. Ms. Albert, you still with us?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had muted it. No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan, hearing no discussion. We'll take a vote.
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, the final item of business this evening is the first and final reading of resolution number 8-2019. This is a resolution to authorize the execution and delivery of lease agreements. Mr. Driggers, information in that regard, sir.
These lease agreements are an assumption of leases that we are acquiring for the purchase of the Greer Golf and Country Club. Because those leases have now been issued in our name, it is necessary for council to approve those. But again, this is part of the acquisition of that property. Mr. Hughes has been working on that as well. I'll ask if he has any additional information in regard to that.
The only thing I would add, this is for the golf carts and for turf equipment that is used to maintain the golf course and of course necessary for its operation and use.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to receive resolution number 8-2019. 2020. Excuse me. Correct. Let me correct that. This is the final reading of resolution number 8-2020. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So motion.
Ms. Albert makes a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Dumas. Any discussion in that? Well, let's start with Mr. Airwood. Any discussion, Mr. Airwood?
No.
District 2.
No.
District 3.
No.
District 4.
I did have a question about, I was looking over one or two of the lease agreements, and it looks like they're long-term leases. Like, for instance, on the first item, I think it's a 33-month lease, and it's due monthly. I mean, is there no opportunity in this scenario to try to renegotiate these leases and shorten the terms or do anything different in that regard?
There are, Mr. Dumas, there are opportunities to renegotiate or to even purchase the equipment.
Mr. Driggers, do we know what staff says on that? I know that we've been in a mode where we've just been under kind of observing what the country club has done in the past. Do we have, is this something that we're going to take a look at and kind of come
Absolutely.
up with, craft our own idea on how we're going to do this moving forward?
Absolutely. As part of our financial modeling for that as an enterprise fund, we'll be evaluating all of those business operational costs, and those lease agreements would be subject that we would either, to Mr. Hughes' point, that we could either renegotiate those or that we could pay those off. Particularly the golf carts is a great example. We know that we're going to be in a position that we will be expiring the current lease and purchasing or leasing new carts for the course going forward. So all of that is under evaluation. We just needed to be able to make the transfer from at this point for the purchase of the golf course so that those leases stayed in force.
And I would also add for council's benefit that through the process of negotiating and amending these leases, it's clear to the lessor company, the finance company, that these were subject to the annual appropriations that you make for the golf course.
Other questions, Mr. Dumas?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. District 5.
Nothing right now.
District 6.
No.
Any final comments or discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Duncan.
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, we have no items before us this evening in executive session. We'll try and figure out how to tackle that in a later date. So let me offer you my sincere thanks. This meeting has gone well. It was a first for all of us. I want to thank our staff that have worked hard to make this happen. Ms. Duncan and Mr. Ridgegill and Mr. Sell and others have particularly in our IT department and others have have worked hard to get us to this point this week, and we appreciate what they've done to make the arrangements to help us be able to meet this evening in this format. I think it has worked well and has served us well this evening. I thank you for the time that you spent to do some beta testing on it and to make sure that everybody was going to be able to participate. I echo the remarks of I think Mr. Dumas earlier. While we would all like to be back in familiar surroundings sometime in the near future, I think that for the foreseeable future that this is going to be our new normal. And as we move forward, we will become more acquainted with not only the technology, but how to better use it and how to involve more of our community and to truly bring this meeting to possibly more people than we've had attend in person. So we will work to that end to provide you with the latest information and technology as we move forward. To do as many of you asked tonight to ask our media sources and others to continue to advertise how they can participate in these meetings. And as always, that information, I left Steve Owens out earlier. Certainly Steve has done a yeoman's job in terms of helping us out this week, and want to tip a hat to him as well. We've done a good job of informing the public, but there is certainly room for improvement in that regard, and we want to make sure that we do a great job in that regard. And so on my behalf, thank you for joining us this evening and for your participation in this meeting. Anything you'd like to add? We thank you for your participation, and stay well and healthy and safe. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Adjourned.